Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the wonderful west coast of Ireland, where there was a tractor a few minutes back going up and down on this beach. Seems to have disappeared though, so I guess that's the end of that for the time being. But never mind, more on this wonderful location in a minute. For the time being, I'd like to talk a little bit about my new favourite lens. My favourite lens I've ever bought, which I took delivery of 3 days ago, something like that. Now, a few months back, when this lens was announced and I was watching all the review videos of this lens, the consensus seemed to be confusion about who on earth would want this lens. And the whole time I was watching those videos, I was thinking, me, I want that lens, and people like me. So I guess I'll talk a bit about that. By the way, it's the 24-50, Sony 24-50 f2.8G lens, not a G Master. But to tell you the truth, all the Sony lenses that I've ever used and owned, I can rarely tell a difference between Gs and G Masters. Maybe that's just me. We were here yesterday afternoon doing a bit of a scout, and the light was just a little bit better for this spot. There was blue sky and a cloud that kind of shaped this little cottage here, which worked really well, but not to be today. Worth coming and checking out again though. And I say we, my friend Rich is in the car. You might know him from Instagram, Paperboyo. We're traveling together this week, so yeah. You get lots of people requesting to take your photo. I bet. But he was a very nice man. I asked him if he was local, and he sort of pointed at the floor and said I was born there 76 years ago. So yeah, he's called Guinness as well, which, yeah, local. The consensus, as I said, seemed to be that reviewers couldn't work out why this lens would be attractive to anybody, particularly people like me who already own a 24-70. Why on earth would you spend more money to get less range with the same aperture? Well, size, basically. Size and weight. Now I say spend more money, but the 24-50 is an awful lot cheaper than the 24-70. I just mean more money if you've already got the 24-70, as I have. And this 24-70 Mark II weighs 695 grams, I think, which is significantly less than the Mark I from Sony. But the 24-50 weighs something like 440 grams, I think. It's basically the same size and weight as the 24 f1.4 that I'm currently filming on now. And that just means it feels an awful lot more balanced on basically any body, I imagine. Certainly this A7R5. And when you're doing street photography, I imagine it'll feel a lot more inconspicuous. Less conspicuous, am I saying that right? You'll feel like people will notice you less, I imagine. But as I say, I've only had this a few days, so I've not tried that yet. Now, of course, the cost of that is that you lose 20mm on the long end compared to a 24-70. But as someone who loves to shoot between 35 and 40 and 50mm, I love the constraint of that. Genuinely, I love the constraint of that. It's why I enjoy shooting with primes so much. But with this lens, it's essentially a couple of different primes, certainly the size of a prime, and it's still relatively fast at f2.8. And as I say, it feels much more balanced, and you've got the added benefit, certainly what I think is a benefit, that when you zoom in, you're actually zooming out to 24mm. Basically, the extended end is 24mm. And given, as I say, that I like to shoot between 35 and 50, it means that for the most part, when I'm shooting, I'll be not extended, which makes it appear smaller, makes you less more conspicuous, less noticeable. So yeah, as I say, when this was announced, I was absolutely delighted. And whether I'll keep this or not, I don't know, because it's a very versatile lens, but I always feel like it's not massively well balanced on a camera like this. And you're more noticed. So that's why I'm very excited about this lens, and that's what I'll be shooting with today, here on the west coast of Ireland, the Dingle Peninsula in particular. I was hopeful that at some point this week I was going to get a chance to stick this map on the front of our car and tell you a little bit about our trip. It's proved a little bit difficult though, along the wild Atlantic Way, which is deserving of its name. Well, welcome back to Wales. I'm never dealing with paper maps ever again, but yes, welcome back to Wales, which luckily for me looks very much like the west coast of Ireland. I did want to talk, even though I'm back in Wales, about our itinerary though, and I couldn't bear you having to watch me sat in that position with that camera angle anymore. I apologise about that. I don't know what I was thinking, but basically, yeah, I wanted to talk about the itinerary that we did both this year and last year, because I think the west coast of Ireland is probably one of my favourite places in the world to shoot. So hopefully this is useful if you would like to visit as well. If you wouldn't like to visit, or you don't think you'll have the chance to visit, then this is really just an excuse to show off my photos. But last year, Rich and I flew to a tiny little airport called Knock and made our way over to what I think is pronounced as Achill Island, which has some very famous spots, including Keem Bay, which you'll have seen if you like Colin Farrell. But aside from that, I think it's got lots of other photography gems that I'd love more time to explore. Maybe like an entire winter. I don't know that Emily will let me do that with a young family. Anyway, last year from there, we made our way down to Galway via a couple of stops. And in Galway, we spent a Saturday evening watching people jumping off of the diving platform. That was great fun too. And then from there, I'm a millennial, I'm not used to this. From there, we made our way to the very famous Ring of Kerry, which we did a loop of one evening. Fantastic place for photography again. We stayed in Killarney, and then we made our way over to the Dingle Peninsula to explore Slee Head Drive, which again was fantastic, before driving over to Cork to catch our flight home. We took 5 or 6 days from memory to do that, and it was brilliant. This time we wanted to concentrate much more on the southwest section of the wild Atlantic Way, and as such we flew to Shannon, another tiny but fantastically connected airport. I flew from Manchester, Rich flew in from London, but I did see in the arrivals hall that you can also fly direct from New York, so brilliantly simple place to get to. And from there we bombed it down again to the Dingle Peninsula, where this time we had chance to explore the north of the Dingle Peninsula, which is what you've just been watching. And then we went over the Connor Pass. Well, we've arrived at Slee Drive, and conditions are a little bit different to last year. Just a tiny bit, which is a good thing, because last year it was almost too nice. Lots of harsh light, even in golden hour. So this is great in a way, but yeah, it's also quite wet and windy. I had about half a second to get my shot before my lens got covered in water. How'd you get on?
It's far too wet. I hardly recognise it. It's so different from last year. It's like a different location almost.
Yeah. Which I do like, but it's better when you're not getting blasted in the face with rain.
Yeah.
I should say before we move on that in the town of Dingle, twice I've had the best banana bread of my life from 2 separate cafes in 2 separate years. So I don't know if it's some sort of banana bread capital. I don't think it is. Maybe it's just coincidence. But yes, if you go to Dingle, get banana bread. We then had a bit more time this year to explore the Ring of Kerry as well. And again, that's probably another place that I could spend months. I'm not massively convinced that this pier was worth the 3 kilometre one-way walk, but 24 hours in, I'm absolutely loving this lens. I love the weight, the balance, and I do really enjoy the fact that it's not extended unless you're zoomed all the way out, which, as I mentioned, I hardly ever am. Also, 24 hours in, I would say that I'm getting a bit of an indication as to why this might be a G lens versus a G Master, but I'm going to reserve my judgment until I can take a look at the files properly in front of a computer, which I'll do at the end of this video. Well, this is about as much my kind of scene as I think it's possible to get. There are boats down here. There's a lovely little beach that a couple was just walking on up there. There's a caution sign, a slipway or a jetty, pier, whatever you might call that. A lovely gate down here, some boats in the background. It's fantastic. I just can't work out where to stand. Ooh, a dog. Missed it. Here we go. Not sure I made the most of that. We'll see. Well, we've got one lone surfer and some sidelight. I say some sidelight, I positioned myself to get as much sidelight as possible. Just waiting for a good wave. Fingers crossed. Also on the Ring of Kerry, I should say, you get to explore the Gap of Dunlow, well, if you go that way. And again, we had very different conditions this year to what we had last year. Much more moody this year, and just a fantastically dramatic place, particularly if, like me, you like to photograph little roads and man-made structures within environments. So that was fantastic. No banana bread experiences on the Ring of Kerry, but I had some fantastic carrot cake in a little town called Sneem. So do check out that as well. From the Ring of Kerry though, we made our way south to the next peninsula, which is the Beera Peninsula. I don't know if that's how you say it. And again, phenomenal little harbours, beautiful little villages, and towards the end there's a cable car over to Dursey Island, which sadly was shut when we were there, but that would have been good fun as well. Another fantastic place to explore though, and well worth at least a day, probably weeks. From there, we went down to a tiny little town called Baltimore, right on the south coast, and we had an evening exploring there. Come on, turn. Turn, yes. That's pretty nice. These buoys are spaced out nicely. I was just over there getting a couple of shots of some kids playing football with the industry in the background, but it's not the sort of thing you can just hang around at indefinitely, which is a shame because it looked incredible. But yeah, thought I'd come over here and focus on something, I don't know, a bit more cliche in some ways, but it's very nice to look at, this little boat. Now in the morning we went to the Baltimore Beacon, which is a lovely spot. Fantastic if the light's good. Maybe I should have gone there the evening before. But basically, on our penultimate day, we travelled to Cork, stopping in a few different places, including, where is it? Galley Head, which had an open day at their lighthouse, so it's very busy, which is either a pro or a con, depending on what you want to photograph. I quite enjoyed the busyness, but yeah, that was good fun. And yes, made our way to Cork, where on our final day, we went to Cobh. Don't know exactly how you say that either. C-O-B-H. But that was the Titanic's last stop. So there's a museum, a memorial, and it's a very colourful place. Really, really nice place to do some street type photography, I'd say. But yeah, another absolutely fantastic trip. And I think I'll spend a lot of time in this part of the world for photography in future. And maybe not in 1, 2, 3 month stints. Maybe it'll be 1, 2 weeks at a time, but even that I think will be fantastic. My next trip, I am certain, will be in winter because I want to see the big swells, the big Atlantic swells, and how they interact with this coastline. But yeah, what a place. Now just quickly, some final comments. That's not right, is it? Right, a quick roundup of this lens after a week of heavy usage, and basically, in short, I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. It's so well balanced, and I love the fact that it's not extended at my most common focal lengths, e.g. 50. Bit of a strange design decision, I guess, for lots of people, but for me, it works perfectly. So I absolutely love it for that. But as I mentioned, I think there is one thing that makes this lens a G lens rather than a G master, and that is distortion. Now typically when I import to Lightroom, I do so with corrections applied, but there isn't currently a profile for this lens because it's so new. But what that means is that I've noticed there is a lot of distortion both at 50 and at 24, the ends basically. A lot more than you perhaps expect from a G Master lens. Now for me that doesn't particularly matter. I've done lots of manual adjustments on lots of the photos that I've taken, and I'm still perfectly happy with things like corner sharpness once I've fixed distortion. But if you're into, I don't know, architecture, if you typically have lots of straight lines in your photos, especially at the corners, then perhaps this lens won't be as good for you as other lenses with less distortion. But yeah, for me, the distortion is something I'm perfectly happy to deal with, given that in terms of size and weight, this lens is just absolutely perfect. So yeah, big fan. Thanks for watching. Reporting here from Wales, but it could be the west coast of Ireland.